This episode of the Small Church Media Podcast is sponsored by #.church. #.church has been a service-based church media company, but recently they've made a pivot to become the one-stop shop for all things church media, tech, training, ideas, and encouragement. They have videos, podcasts, free resources, man, I really can't talk, and blog posts that they update pretty much every single day to help your church grow in every facet of ministry life. And the best part? It's all completely free. We had #.church's founder, Bobby King, here on the podcast a few weeks ago to talk about the future of equipping the church digitally. So go back and check out that episode. But if you want to see how you can get free resources and training for your church, head over to #.church today. Let's jump into the final conversation all around this idea of branding and how to bring your church brand into every aspect of your church. You guys ready to have this conversation? Let's get it.
This is the Small Church Media Podcast with Mark Hyde.
You know, if I had $1 for every time I actually got an intro or this podcast just done correctly without messing up some word, yeah, I'd probably have $2. It always doesn't mess up. But either way, welcome back to the Small Church Media Podcast. We are on episode 80 officially here on the podcast. And currently, we are on week 4 of the 4-part series all around branding for your church. So far with this whole conversation, we've talked about just what is branding. And we talked about the idea that branding is more than just your logos or your colors. But branding is all about the voice and the mission and the purpose and the visual identity. And also what people believe about your church. A more succinct way to put it is your brand is the why, the what, and the how of your church. Why your church exists, what your church is doing, and how are you going to put some action steps into the whys and the whats to honestly prove to people out in the community and people inside of your own 4 walls that you guys actually live by what you preach. And then on part 2, we talked all about logos. And rather than going into what makes a good logo or a bad logo, because I mean, guys, literally there's thousands of different blog posts all about this topic. Just Google it and you will find all of them. We talked about 3 truths and 3 lies regarding logos. Kind of like a, what's the word I'm looking for? Not false or not 2 truths and a lie, but basically the idea of here's some false realities that people believe about logos that aren't true. And here's 3 things that honestly are true about logos. At the end of the day, your church logo matters. Last week, we talked about the whole different idea around a house of brands or a branded house. And what should your church do? Should you have a house of brands, which means the student ministry, the women's ministry, the kids ministry are their own silo entities with their own logos, their own mission, their own purpose, their own goals, and even, let's say, just their own, almost like mini sub-church inside of the church? Or should the church be one church with different facets inside of that ministry? So go back and listen to those 3 episodes, because today we're going to wrap it all together. We're going to bring it into a big conversation about how do we bring our brand into every aspect of our church life. So today we're going to talk about how to do this, but we're going to change the terminology around a little bit, okay? Because I know the word branding can have kind of a bad connotation when it comes to church, right? Now, branding is what we use all the time in marketing. In fact, what's your brand kit? Do you have brand kit, brand guidelines? I use this terminology almost every single day on the job. But I know for churches, we want to make sure we keep that church ministry mission and focus in mind. So for today's conversation, although you could literally substitute out the words I'm going to replace it with the word branding, we're going to change it a little bit, and this will make more sense by the time we get to the end of the podcast. But rather than use the word branding for the rest of this episode, we're going to switch it to mission and purpose. Okay, so your brand in today's conversation is all about the mission and purpose of your church. Now, again, your brand is more than just a logo. It's also more than just your mission and your purpose. It all works together. But for today's conversation, rather than saying, we're going to bring your brand into this, we're going to bring your brand into that, because I don't want us to lose sight of what the purpose and the mission of our local church is and get all confused and muddied in the water. So rather than talk all around the idea of how to bring your brand into every every aspect of church life. I guess I'm kind of baiting and switching you. We're going to talk about how to bring your mission and purpose into all areas of your church life. Because in week 1, we talked about the fact of, as a part of your brand, you need to know why your church exists, what your church is going to do, and then how your church is going to fulfill all these various different voids. So if why your church exists is to not just reach people near and far, or actually just reach near and far. So our church mission is to reach people near and far, okay? So what are we going to do about it? Okay, we're going to have different ministries. We're going to have local ministries that are doing mission trips and also very far ones. Okay, so then how are we going to do all this? Well, we're going to have trainings and we're going to have workshops. We're going to go on mission trips. All of our student ministries are going to be revolving around this idea because we want to just teach people how to share their faith near and far. We talked about that in the first week, so we're just going to switch it today and talk about your mission and purpose and how to bring that into every aspect of church life. Make sense? I hope it makes sense. Let's jump into it. So today, we're going to talk about the 5 different ways you can bring your brand or your mission and purpose into all areas of your church life. The first one is bringing your mission and purpose into print and promotional materials. Okay, so how do you bring your brand into every aspect of your church life? You bring your mission and purpose into your print and promotional materials. So if we go back into the brand, I want you to focus on the primary mission of your church. What is your church about? What is the daily purpose of your church? If you have a mission statement for your church, this should be blasted, literally, everywhere that you can. I'm talking about shirts, promo materials, your sign out on the lawn, your signs around the lobby, rather than on your screen when people walk in the service and they just see the big church logo up on the screen. No. Take that thing down, put up your mission statement there. Instead, on your bulletin, drop your mission and purpose statement there on the bulletin. But anywhere you print everything, put your mission statement, your purpose statement, what your church is all about. Now, yes, include your logo and all these different things, but make sure you unashamedly put your mission and your purpose in all of your print and promotional materials. For example, let's say you're creating some t-shirts, all right? Now, every year, what we did at Southside, we had a new shirt for VBS, and we always did like a VBS-themed shirt, but then we switched, and we're like, okay, if our people are wearing these shirts out in the community all the time, shouldn't we have them be more reflective of our church's mission and values rather than just a scripture verse that they can, you could buy one of these shirts at a Family Christian Bookstore? Let's make it all about our church and impacting our world for Christ one life at a time on all of our shirts, and we'll just change the colors from year to year. And so for VBS, we decided to go this route instead. So now whenever someone wears a Southside shirt, either at their house, in the office, if you wear a t-shirt at the office, I don't know, but anywhere you wear a t-shirt, now all of a sudden, it's not just a random Bible verse or a massive church logo slapped across the front of someone's shirt, but rather it's the mission and the purpose of our church, which reminds the person who's wearing that shirt what our purpose and mission of the church is, and it also can create another conversation with other people while you're out and about in the community. So rather than wasting very, very valuable space, yes, you need to have your logo on your church sign and all your promotional materials and stuff like that as well. Make sure you include your mission and your purpose in your print promotional materials because it's just an easy way to remind people and instill people what your church is all about. The second way you could bring your brand into every area of church life is to bring your mission and purpose into your website, your homepage, ministry pages, next step page. Tell people why your church exists, what your church is all about, how your church seeks to accomplish this, and then invite them in. Now, this is the whole purpose of a church website, is it not? It's to attract, it's to engage, and it's to invite people into the community and the fellowship of the church. And if you're using your church website just as like a business card where it's like, hey, these are our service times, here's our address, here's our pastor, we would love for you to visit. Honestly, that's just a waste of space on your website. Rather, though, if you can start infusing your mission and purpose into your website, you can find that your website's content will be so much easier to create, produce, and to create a very cohesive flow in your website. If the whole purpose of the website is to explain the purpose and the mission of the church, how the different ministries play into this, and how other people can play into this as well. And then make sure on the website you back it up as well. So you say, okay, so we're all about this. Here's ways about how we actually put some words to our feet to our faith and put our money where our mouth is with what we say we actually believe. So if you want to bring your whole brand into every aspect of church life, you got to make sure you slap your mission and purpose into print promotional materials. You got to make sure it's on your website and that it's infused everywhere in your website. But you also want to make sure that you bring your mission and your purpose into each and every ministry of the church. When you talk about a new ministry or just talk about a random ministry and announcement, are you explaining how those ministries play into the church's mission and purpose? If you have an event, do you explain how this plays into your church's why and your what? When you're talking about Bible studies in the church, do you just say, hey, we have Bible studies before each service, we would love you to come? Honestly, you probably shouldn't say that because you're not giving people the why behind the what. You're not telling people a good reason why they need to join a Bible study or take part in whatever event. Rather than saying something like something very generic and just a simple invite, you could say something a lot more specific, and in that invite, bring your mission and purpose into it. For example, I'm just going to use the church that I was at staff at for many years. You can say something like this. Here at Southside, we are all about growing together to grow into true followers of Jesus Christ. In order to help you grow and connect with others and Jesus, we have Bible studies that are before each of our worship services. Now, in the service, it's a lot more of a sit and learn situation, but in our Bible study, there is room for reading together, for dialogue, for questions, and discovery that you can only get when studying the Bible together. If you would like to join one of these Bible studies and grow in your faith and maybe even make some new friends, please see me after the worship service and I'll make sure I connect you with the right group for you. Do you see how this instantly inspires emotion and prompts people to make a decision? It's because you are explaining your church's mission and purpose. You're telling people how it helps them, and then you're inviting them into that ministry. So if you start doing this with each and every ministry of your church, including the student ministry, the kids ministry, your midweek programs, your engagement groups, your outreach groups, and especially your outreach efforts and events that you're doing for the community, you can be sure that you can get people to know why your church exists. They can then have a reason to be a part of it. Then they can be excited about it and go out and actually get involved and go and do it. The fourth way you can bring your brand into your every aspect of church life is you can bring your mission and your purpose into each and every sermon that you do. This is going to be a really short one, but in your sermon application, you can actually bring in your purpose and mission into how people can live out the teaching from that week. So as you're teaching, you can say something like, as you're explaining the text, after you explain it, you've illustrated, and now it's time to apply it. You can say something like, this is why here at Southside, we believe that we are called to do. Insert your mission and purpose statement. And here's why. From this text, we read this, and this is why we believe it, and this is why we do what we do, and we're inviting you into this as well. As you're preaching every single week, so many times we explain the text, we illustrate it, and then we apply it just to people's lives, but we never kind of bring into how does this play into the whole mission and purpose of the church? And if we can do that, you can inspire your people to get up out of their seats and go actually do something. Because the biggest thing that is hurting churches right now is when churches are viewed as simply social clubs, where people pay their tithes, they pay their dues, they show up, they get served, and then they leave. But rather, we want to actually push people towards engagement and to go and do something with their faith. So an easy way to bring your mission and your purpose into this area of your church life, specifically from the pulpit while you're preaching, is as a part of the application. You don't want to do this every single point. You don't want to do this every single week necessarily. But if you can find a way to say, from this teaching, this is why we do what we do. This is why we are what we are about. So let's get after and let's do it together. So far, we talked about the 4 different ways you can bring your brand or, again, your mission and purpose into your church life. And the first one is you can bring your mission and purpose into all of your print and promotional materials. Number 2, you can bring your mission and purpose into your website. Number 3, bring your mission and purpose into each ministry of your church. Number 4, bring your mission and purpose into each sermon. And then number 5, the last thing, is bring your mission and purpose into your dismissal from the worship service. anytime you dismiss your church, say your church's mission and purpose during that dismissal process. At Southside, it was my job to really go over the announcements right at the end of service and then dismiss everybody. And I always said, hey, everybody, have a great week. Go out and impact one person's life, because our mission statement here is impacting our world for Christ, one life at a time. It wasn't always that long, but sometimes I would say, have a great week. Go out and impact someone's life for Jesus. And that was it. So in my dismissal in the text, whenever I would send people out, the last thing they would hear from the stage was the mission and the purpose of our church, and a reminder of what our church family is all about. So my question for you today is this. Well, first, do you actually know what your church is all about? Does your church have a why, a what, and a how? Does your church family have common language around what your church body is all about? Does your community know what your church is all about? When people on the outside see your church building or your logo or your papers or things in the mail, they will instantly connect a thought that they have in their mind about your church. And my question is when they see your church's logo or name or hear about people or meet people in the community from your church, what do they think? They're going to think something, whether good or bad. Rather than let people assume that they know what your church is all about, be clear and be bold about your mission and your purpose. Put it everywhere. Talk about it, encourage around it, and remind people why their lives matter to the mission of your local church. And before I let you go, here's one last thing to note. You can't just say your mission and your purpose one time and then just call it quits because, people have heard me say it. It's on our shirt. They just know what it's all about. You have to reiterate your purpose and mission over and over and over again. You constantly need to remind people about the why and the what of your church and invite them into the hows. Granted, you'll get sick of saying your mission and purpose, but it's when you get sick of saying your mission and purpose that people will finally start to believe in your mission and purpose. You got it? You'll get sick of saying your mission and purpose over and over again, but it's when you start to get sick of it that people will finally start to believe in your mission and purpose, and that's when you need to double down and constantly remind people what the church is all about. Well, guys, I hope you enjoyed this conversation, this 4-week conversation all around branding for churches. I want to remind you guys that next week is actually the last episode of the Small Church Media Podcast, at least for the near foreseeable future. We're getting more and more reports about our son, and we've actually had some really, really good news that although he does have some kind of congenital heart defects, he's going to need surgery when he's a little bit older, like 4 to 6 months, but we're hearing that he may not need an operation right when he's born. So that's super, super exciting, but it's still going to be a long road for us. So just to make sure I take care of the wife and literally all the other 7 kids that I have and my day job, I got to put a pause here, and I want to make sure that we end it right, we end it well, and that we have a great conversation for the final episode next week, where we're going to talk about the 7 things that I wish churches knew about media and technology. So if that's the last episode we ever do, we go out with a bang. But is this going to be the last one? I don't know. But we're going to take a break for a little bit. But in the meantime, if this episode or any of these episodes were an encouragement to you, it would be awesome if you shared this with another small church in your local connection or community. Leave a rating and review anywhere podcasts can be found. Again, I'm not taking down the podcast episodes. I'm not taking down the free resource library. So make sure you engage with those. And if you do have any questions, even after the show's all said and done, maybe you found the show a year after from now and you have a question about it, don't be scared to shoot me an email at hello@smallchurch.media or at my personal email, hello@markhyde.com, Mark with a C, hello@markhyde.com, and I'd be sure to answer any question that you guys have. But again, it's been a great time hanging out with you guys this week, so come back next week, same time, same place, for another episode of the Small Church Media Podcast.
The Small Church Media Podcast is a part of Marc Hyde Creative.